What if Rome never fell? The world would be unrecognizable. Imagine opening your eyes in the year 2026. But the world outside your window is not the world you know. The skyline is filled with futuristic towers, but beneath them stand thousands of years old monuments. Self-driving vehicles move through streets built on ancient Roman roads. Artificial intelligence controls modern cities, while people still speak a language that was once used by Roman soldiers and emperors. There is no Italy, no France, no Germany, because the borders of Europe were never created the way we know them today. Instead, one civilization survived. A civilization that should have disappeared more than 1,500 years ago, the Roman Empire. In our timeline, Rome fell. The Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 AD, ending one of the most powerful civilizations in human history. But what if that moment never happened? What if Rome found a way to survive? What if the empire that built roads, laws, and cities continued evolving for another 1,500 years? Would Rome become the greatest civilization the world has ever seen? Or would a 2,000-year-old empire eventually become trapped by its own past? This is the story of an alternate Earth. A world where Rome never fell. The year is 476 AD. The Roman Empire is dying. For centuries, Rome controlled a vast territory stretching across Europe, North Africa, and the Mediterranean. Its armies were feared. Its roads connected continents. Its laws influenced civilizations that came after it. But behind the greatness was a growing crisis. The empire had become too large to control. The economy was weakening. Political struggles were destroying stability. The army depended more and more on foreign soldiers, and enemies were gathering at the borders. For many historians, the fall of Rome was not caused by one single event. It was the result of decades of problems. But in this alternate timeline, something changes. Roman leaders realize that the old system cannot survive. Instead of trying to restore the past, they decide to create a new future. The first major reform is political. The emperor gives more power to local regions. Instead of forcing every province to follow the same system, Rome allows different cultures to manage their own affairs while remaining connected to the empire. The second reform is military. Rome stops relying only on massive armies fighting endless wars. Instead, it creates a professional defense system focused on protecting borders and maintaining stability. The third reform is economic. The empire invests in trade, technology, and infrastructure. Ancient Roman roads become the foundation of a new economic network. Cities that once depended on conquest begin depending on innovation. And slowly, something unexpected happens. Rome begins changing. It is no longer the empire of ancient emperors. It becomes something completely different. A civilization capable of surviving. But survival is only the beginning. Because Rome's greatest challenge is not the enemies outside its borders. It is the future itself. The world is entering a new age. An age of kingdoms, discoveries, and revolutions. And Rome must answer one question: can an ancient empire adapt to a world that has moved beyond the ancient era? In our reality, after the fall of Rome, Europe changes forever. The continent becomes divided into countless kingdoms. New languages develop, new borders appear, new powers rise. Eventually, countries like France, Germany, and England emerge. But in this alternate world, that process never happens, because Rome never disappears. Instead of hundreds of separate kingdoms competing for power, Europe develops around one continuous civilization. The Roman Empire becomes the center of culture, trade, and knowledge. But this does not mean Rome remains frozen in the past. A civilization cannot survive for centuries by refusing change. Over time, Rome begins absorbing new ideas from every corner of its territory. Greek philosophers influence education. Egyptian engineers improve architecture. European craftsmen develop new technologies. Different cultures become part of the Roman identity. The empire becomes less like a traditional conquest machine and more like a massive interconnected civilization. Imagine walking through a Roman city in the year 1200. You would still see ancient symbols, the same roads, the same architecture, but the city would also look completely different. Large universities would teach science and mathematics. Trade centers would connect distant regions. Ships carrying goods would travel across a Mediterranean that remains the heart of global commerce. But this success creates a new problem. Because history has always shown one truth: the bigger an empire becomes, the harder it is to control. Rome now faces a challenge no army can defeat: distance. Millions of people across thousands of kilometers must remain united. Different regions have different cultures, different communities have different goals. The empire must constantly balance unity and independence. And this struggle will become even greater when the next great transformation arrives. A transformation that changes human civilization forever. The Industrial Revolution. In our world, the Industrial Revolution begins in Britain. Factories expand. Steam engines transform transportation. Machines replace traditional production. And within a few centuries, the world changes completely. But in this alternate timeline, the center of industrial power is somewhere else. Rome. At first, many Roman leaders fear industrialization. They worry that machines will destroy old traditions. They worry that rapid change will weaken the empire. But eventually, they realize something important. The civilizations that refuse to change disappear. The civilizations that adapt survive. So Rome begins its own industrial revolution. Ancient roads become modern transportation networks. Old ports become global trade centers. Cities built thousands of years ago transform into futuristic industrial capitals. The streets of Rome become a place where the ancient world meets the modern world. Stone monuments stand beside factories. Ancient forums stand beside scientific laboratories. The symbol of the past becomes the engine of the future. But this transformation creates a new conflict. Because technology does not only change economies, it changes people. Workers demand more rights. Citizens demand more influence. New ideas spread across the empire. And Rome faces the most difficult challenge in its entire history. Not invasion, not war, but change from within. Because the question is no longer, can Rome survive? The question becomes, can Rome remain Rome while becoming something completely new? By the beginning of the 20th century, the world has entered a completely different era. In our reality, Europe is divided into many powerful nations. Britain controls a vast empire. France becomes a major colonial power. Germany rises as an industrial giant. But in this alternate world, the map looks completely different. There is no competition between dozens of European countries. Instead, one ancient civilization remains at the center of global affairs, the Roman Empire. However, surviving for thousands of years does not mean Rome remains the same. The empire has learned one important lesson: a civilization that refuses to change will eventually disappear. So Rome begins another transformation. The old imperial system slowly evolves. Local governments gain more authority. Citizens demand greater participation. The role of the emperor changes. The empire becomes less focused on one powerful ruler and more focused on institutions that can survive generations. By the early 1900s, Rome is no longer just an ancient empire. It is a modern superpower. Its universities produce scientists. Its factories produce advanced machines. Its ports connect continents. Its cities become some of the largest centers of technology and culture in the world. But a new question appears. In our timeline, the 20th century was shaped by the rise of new powers, especially one nation across the Atlantic, the United States. And now, Rome must face a completely new challenge, not from invading armies, but from another vision of the future. In our reality, the United States becomes the dominant global power. Its rise is connected to a very specific chain of events. European nations weaken after devastating wars. Old empires collapse. America fills the space left behind. But in this alternate timeline, history takes another direction. Europe is not destroyed by centuries of rivalry. There is no sudden power vacuum. Instead, America grows in a world where Rome is still powerful. The relationship between these two civilizations becomes one of the most fascinating stories of the modern era. On one side is Rome, a civilization built on thousands of years of tradition, a society that values stability, continuity, and long-term development. On the other side is America, a younger nation built on rapid innovation, expansion, and constant change. They represent two completely different approaches to civilization. Rome asks, how can we preserve what humanity has already built? America asks, how can we create something completely new? At first, they compete economically. Roman companies dominate European markets. American industries expand across the oceans. Technology becomes the new battlefield. Not soldiers, not armies, ideas, science, innovation. But eventually, both sides realize something important. The world is too connected for one civilization to completely dominate another. Instead of endless conflict, Rome and America create a complicated relationship, sometimes rivals, sometimes partners, two different paths shaping the future of humanity. Perhaps the biggest difference in this alternate world is the absence of the same historical disasters. In our reality, the 20th century was defined by two world wars. They destroyed cities, changed borders, ended empires, and completely transformed global politics. But if Rome had survived, those events would unfold in a completely different way. There is no divided Europe filled with competing nations. There is no sudden collapse of old powers. There is no empty space waiting for new countries to dominate. However, a peaceful world is not guaranteed, because even the strongest civilizations face internal struggles. A massive empire containing countless cultures must constantly answer difficult questions. How much independence should regions have? How should resources be distributed? How should ancient traditions coexist with modern ideas? The greatest threat to Rome is no longer an enemy at the border. It is the possibility that the empire becomes too large, too complex, and too slow to adapt. Throughout history, many powerful civilizations failed because they could not change fast enough, and Rome must avoid the same fate. The empire survives not because it is perfect, but because every generation is forced to rebuild it. Now imagine the world today. The year is 2026. A Roman Empire still exists, but it is not the empire of ancient history books. It is something completely new, a civilization that carries thousands of years of memories into the modern age. The capital city of Rome has transformed into one of the world's greatest cities. Ancient monuments still stand. The Colosseum remains a symbol of the past, but around it, modern skyscrapers rise into the sky. Artificial intelligence manages transportation. Advanced technology connects millions of citizens. Space programs launch missions beyond Earth. The empire that once built roads across Europe now builds networks across the planet. But the biggest difference is not technology, it is culture. In our world, Roman influence survives through fragments, languages, laws, architecture, ideas. But in this alternate reality, Rome never became history. It remained part of everyday life. Children still learn about Roman history not as something ancient, but as the story of their own civilization. However, one final question remains. After surviving for more than 2,000 years, would Rome truly be successful? Or would its greatest achievement simply be surviving? Because history teaches us something important. No empire lasts forever, not because it lacks power, not because it lacks wealth, but because the world around it never stops changing. Maybe the most interesting part of this alternate world is not imagining a stronger Rome. Maybe it is understanding why the real Rome still matters today, because even after its fall, Rome never truly disappeared. Its roads influenced modern transportation. Its laws influenced modern governments. Its architecture inspired cities around the world. Its language shaped countless cultures. The Roman Empire ended, but Roman ideas continued. So perhaps the question is not, what if Rome never fell? Perhaps the better question is, how much of Rome is still alive in our world today? Because civilizations are not remembered only by the land they control or the wars they win. They are remembered by the ideas they leave behind. And maybe that is the greatest lesson of Rome. The greatest civilizations are not the ones that never change. They are the ones that learn how to survive change.